to The Collective. We have another fantastic show planned out for you today. And before I get into anything, I just want to remind everybody, like the show, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, get your little email in the morning whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. Now, we have Steve joining us again. Thank you very much for jumping in. He's no longer in the school's podcast studio in the basement. He's in his own house, so it's always good to see you.
Also
And
in a
Jay
basement
joining
with
us
the door
again.
locked.
There you go, in the basement door lock. Jay's coming to us again. He has power once again, thankfully. So we are always happy to have you on here. Just as a heads up, none of us are doctors. So anything that we do say is our own personal experience and should be taken as such. If you have any questions or thoughts, by all means, do your own research as well. If you have any questions or thoughts, put it in the comment section. That way we can place it up on the screen, discuss it, and get added into the conversation. Any thoughts or questions before we get into the topic? Everybody good? Groovy. Okay. So the topic today, again, as Steve was saying just a second ago, is very broad, but I think it's important to discuss. So, change and uncertainty. To get us started, I'm going to do a quick definition, and then we'll dive into our own personal thoughts on this. Uh, so, change described as to cause to be different, to give a completely different form or appearance to, or to transform something, or to give and receive reciprocally as an interchange. So, some interesting points there. And then uncertainty, the definition right now is the condition of being uncertain or doubt. Something uncertain, the estimated amount or percentage by which an estimated or calculated value may differ from the true value. But that's besides the point. So, let's talk about something more, a little broader on that. What are your guys' thoughts on change and uncertainty? Let's start with Jay.
Sure.
What do you think?
Change. I think change and uncertainty are sort of like cause and effect, right? Without change, I don't know if there is uncertainty. So they kind of are like two sides of the same coin. And for me, if I dig into like my personal experience on change, it has been the single greatest factor in me becoming a better person. So change with regards to being mentally well, being physically well, going from a situation that you're uncomfortable in or that's not the best for you. Change is a difficult thing because it is an interruption of the pattern of our daily life. And all of us, most of us know that anytime that we interrupt the pattern of our daily life, you end up in uncertainty. You end up in a situation that's uncomfortable because now you're having to either create or recognize a new pattern, or you're having to do something you've never done before. And so I'll go back to what change means to me. Change to me means growth. I think change is, like I said at the beginning, is where anybody who's looking to improve their life has to go in order to succeed in that goal or that achievement they're hoping to get. Because if you're in a situation where you want to become something else, you can't take current you there, right? If you're trying to become the greatest marathon runner in the world, you have to change in order to do that. If you're trying to be mentally unwell because you've been struggling with depression or anxiety, or if you're caught with the struggles of PTSD, nothing will happen unless you change. And so for me, I think that's one of the most important aspects of life, is to be adaptable to change and to accept a level of uncertainty in your life, so that you're kind of always moving in that chaotic sphere, and so that you don't get comfortable just in the sedentary motions of a patterned life. And so I think that we should all embrace change. I think change is well, it actually even speaks, sorry, I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent here. It actually even speaks to what evolution is, right? Evolution is change and uncertainty. Evolution is adaptability, and that's what change and uncertainty offer, is the ability to adapt. And Charles Darwin, when he talked about survival of the fittest, he wasn't talking about survival of the person with the biggest muscles or the hugest stick or could swing the best from the vines. He was talking about survival of the most adaptable. And adaptability, I think, is literally change within uncertainty. And so if you have the ability to change and live within uncertainty, then you are more adaptable. Then that means you're fit. And so I think that change and uncertainty speak literally to evolution, in that the more apt you are to accept the chaos of change and uncertainty, the more adaptable you are, the better served you are in life.
Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I think that change, just speaking from personal experience, change has been probably the biggest barrier that I've had as I've grown into the man that I am right now. In the sense that change has always been something that has been a scary, like it's the unknown of change that has caused me struggle. And what I've learned to do is embrace the actual process as opposed to the end point. I was always stuck on this idea of change having a definitive end point that what felt too far away, it felt too big, it felt too unattainable, or it felt too risky. And now later in life, I think what I've done has been able to like the word adaptation was there, and I feel like I've been able to adapt to change a lot more because I enjoy the process more of change. But that's something that I've had to learn to do. Um, and it wasn't until I had a mentor younger in my life who was able to just kind of say, like, why are you already 10 steps ahead when you have 2 steps to go right in front of you? And so I think that what I learned to do was just sort of appreciate the 2 steps that I was able to take. And then what that does is it helps almost, and the word uncertainty is an interesting one because I almost fall back on the things that I'm certain about on my way through the uncertainty. Like, I know that I'm going to ground myself every day. I know that I'm going to have a mental health practice every day. I know I'm going to take a breath when I get worked up. And those are certainties that I've built into my process of change that actually give me a great deal of comfort on my way through the uncertainty, if that makes any sense. I'm
Yeah.
hopeful that it does.
Yeah.
And so I feel like having a process in place that allows you to celebrate the little things when change is happening, that is what allows me to kind of navigate it now later in life, and especially raising kids and complex kids at that, like watching our kids change and knowing how overwhelming that feels, because I felt that when I was younger. It's like, hey, let's just celebrate the little wins. Like, we use that word a lot in our home, and the idea of a little win. Every day there's a little win we can celebrate, and one little win gets us one step further to that change that we're hopeful to see. So yeah.
I like it. Sean, thoughts?
Yeah, I do. So, a lot of people need to change. We all need to change from time to time, but it's a matter of how often or how consistently, or are you constantly seeking it, or are you constantly trying to stay away from it? And so, change. Everyone needs to change, in my opinion, on a regular basis. So, why don't people change? And I think it's because they don't understand what the opposite of change is. Here's a good word: stagnation. Who wants to hang around a stagnant body of water that starts stinking up the place, starts getting weedy, starts smelling? That is what staying away from change is: a stagnation of life. But no one puts it across that way because no one wants to point a finger at someone and say, bro, you're stinking up the place. You're making the place weedy. You're stagnant. But that's sometimes what we've got to say to those around us, and sometimes that's what we've got to say to ourselves is, am I stagnant right now? I probably need to pick up the pace to change. So why change for ourselves? Well, some people can't, because if they could, they would have, but they haven't. And so how to change them? Well, if you can't change for yourself, you got to change for the team around you. And I think that that is the most powerful cause of change, is when you put two people together and ask them, are you trying to change for yourself, or are you trying to change for your family? Let's see where that conversation goes.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Sorry, Jay. I just have one thought before I want to kick you off. Was what breeds in stagnant waters? Parasites, right? If you think about
Mhm.
things that are stagnant, parasites grow in that area because nothing's moving. And yet,
Yeah.
mountain rivers that are constantly flowing are the cleanest you'll ever find, right? So, just a quick thought on that one. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, when Sean was talking about change, he was talking about if you can't do it for yourself, then you do it for your team or something else. And um, so I'm going to do a little selfish talk here, because change for me, like I alluded to at the beginning, was it's sort of been the biggest thing in my life for the last couple of years. So the quick backstory is, when I was as mentally unwell as I had ever been because of PTSD due to my job as a policeman, just in case people are listening that don't know me, I was living every day like Groundhog Day. I was going to work and going throughout my life stagnant, literally like a filthy bacteria filled pond, that there was no inflow and no outflow from this thing that was me existing within myself. And when the threat of losing my wife and children became ever present because of my illness, I had no choice but to change. Change was thrust upon me. And I think Sean's right in saying that it's hard for almost anybody to change. Just look out at the world that you see, and you can pick apart the flaws that you see on the outside of almost everybody. But what you don't know is that there are internal flaws that are even more great than the ones you see on the outside of people. And that was what was my problem. Was it was on me, and it was all my problems to deal with, and I felt like I just could not take that first step because I was unwilling to let go of who I was. I had spent almost my entire life building and developing the person that I was, the person that I had become through all of my experiences. And then, of course, with 19 years of policing, I had wrapped up my personality around the authority and the power and what I got from my job. And so the thought of having to change who I was in order to get better was really frightening. And I think from a neurological standpoint, there must be something in our minds that really does have a fear of change, because it takes us out of the comfort of where we're at. And, we all know that we fight the challenge of wanting to be comfortable all day versus doing things that are better for ourselves because they aren't comfortable. And for me, that was one of the great challenges of change. Was there was going to be a very serious level of discomfort in having to turn my entire body and my mind and my brain and my activities and my habits and my patterns around. So, I was drastically overweight. I was drinking every day. I was using over-the-counter pain medication to try and soothe myself. I wasn't exercising. I was eating terribly. I was coming home and doing the exact same things I did every single day. Get home, ignore everybody, sit on the couch, go outside to the garage, grab a beer, smoke a joint, and then the next day do the exact same thing because I was comfortable right there. And so eventually something happened. There was a snapping point in my life where I decided I'd had enough. I had to regain control of who I was, but I couldn't continue on in my future bringing what was behind me forward. I couldn't be past Jay and have a better forward momentum by bringing my past life with me. I had to leave that behind in order to flourish, in order to overcome the struggles that I had. And it was the change that was almost felt like an insurmountable task. And I spoke about this with my therapist a lot. And he said to me one time, the two of Sean and Chance, you may have heard me say this before, but I had to grieve the loss of who I was while I was changing. I actually had to sit with it in a form of mindfulness to see that there was a part of my ego, there was a part of me in my mind that was so dedicated to what I had become that it was fighting me every day to stay that way. And I don't think we really like to operate in chaos. We prefer to operate in something that's more known to us. But in order to become greater, I had to basically allow my old self to die. And I needed to grieve the death of who I was, thinking that I might never put my uniform on again. I'd been drinking all my life since I was 13 years old. I socialized by drinking. I go to a restaurant, I have a beer, I sit down at the end of a day, I drink. And so to walk away from alcohol was another massive change in my life. And I had to learn to adapt to all the social settings that came with drinking alcohol, all of the times at the restaurant where I wanted to have a beer, all of the feelings like, oh, a nice cold beer would be great after I did this activity. And every time that I came up against that, there was this internal sensation of like anxiety and discomfort that I was breaching my own protocol. Imagine that you have to use your left hand to do something because you've injured your right hand. All of a sudden, you're in a very unpredictable environment and you have to change all of your patterns and your habits. And it's going to be massively uncomfortable. And that's what I found when I was changing, when I was having to become more loving and compassionate and become more vulnerable in order that I could overcome the mental health barriers that I had. This was all wrapped up in change. And what it was doing was, instead of waking up every day and going about the exact same patterns, I was living in uncertainty because I required change to flourish. And so change and uncertainty were, like I said, two sides of the same coin, but they were 100% required for me to save my own life. And I think it's that pattern and that subroutine that we have in our mind, which is probably intertwined with our ego, which is also a sense of who we are, that makes it change very difficult. So when Sean says we all need to change, we all do, but it's really difficult because you're literally having to like reacquire and establish a new pattern in your brain, which takes a lot of time. And so, yeah, change is, I think what Sean says is absolutely true. We all need to change, but the magic sauce or the thing that allows us to change is difficult. And everybody has to find that in their own way. Mine was not by choice. I was thrown into it. It was almost by attrition, if you will.
Well, I would say that it is a choice because you did make the choice. You chose to choose, or you chose to change because the opportunity was presented to you, right?
I suppose you're
You
right.
can continue to do what you want or continue to do what you're doing, and that will lead to X. And you had to make peace with that like, I don't want X. And then you engaged it, right? And it was, so I would push back that it wasn't.
Well, yeah, the choice of change was created years prior to that change through all of those years of drinking that you were ignoring. I mean, the change was required years ago, but you just didn't look it in the face and punch it in the throat, which is what you've done now. And so change is only a requirement when you recognize that you need to change. And so that plays off of what you're saying, Jay, with change and uncertainty are kind of like two sides of the coin. But I know a boatload of guys who are certain that they don't need to change because they're comfortable in their uncertainty to some degree. So how do you get someone to change who is certain that they don't need to change? Well, usually that's a long, hard, sometimes finger-wagging conversation about, bro, you've been drinking since you were 13. Are you kidding me right now? Let's sit down and talk about that. That's how to drag someone out of a level of comfort, how to pattern interrupt someone by, sometimes you got to be a jerk to them, or they think you're a jerk maybe. But whatever it takes, whatever lever is required, if I believe that someone has to change because of the way they're running their program, not in isolation, but in a team setting, either through family or through the bigger team that's wrapped around them, if I think that they're running a really bad program and they've got change ahead of them, I'm going to let them know because I don't want them to be ambushed by their family blowing up because I didn't have a conversation with them about, bro, it is not normal to drink 4 cases of beer each night.
Yeah. Steve, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Sean said there is super poignant, and that's see, in my family, I grew up with a lot of dysfunction, and it was those tough conversations that I had with people in my family that really did predicate my change, because they were and continue to be so stuck in certain patterns that by me trying to, and Sean and I and Chance, we chatted about this on the last podcast that I did, was the idea of accountability versus responsibility, right? And Sean kind of pushed back and made a really good point when he said that. And so my thought was that accountability is a feeling, responsibility is an action. But Sean pushed back and said, but by holding somebody accountable, by getting them to feel that, that is responsibility, that is the action. And what happened in my situation was I was actively working to hold people accountable for the changes that they needed for themselves. And they were so stuck and they're still walking those paths. But what it did is it jump-started me into my change, because watching them be so stuck and wanting to throat punch them into action, it got to a point where I was banging my head against the wall. And then I said, okay, if they're going to sink themselves, then I'm going to swim, and I'm going to be the change that I need to see. And part of that was this hope that I had that I could be like a mentor, a role model to them, by showing them that change is possible through my actions, and that by my it's tough to say, but by my like developing success, or by change, that I was becoming healthier mentally, physically, emotionally, and having more success just in all facets of my life. It really was with the intention of showing them that change is possible. And then just the exciting byproduct is that, guess what? My life got way more enjoyable. I had a lot less uncertainty in my life because the change that I was making was slowly just chipping away the layers and helping me build a really solid foundation that I feel like I stand on today. And I think one word that when I'm listening to the three of you talk about this, one word that really comes to mind for me is forgiveness. Is change really does have to happen through a process of forgiveness. At least in my world, it did. And not only forgiveness for like my parents or my brother, I had to literally forgive them so that the toxicity that existed, and then this is sounding very judgmental and harsh about them, and I love them dearly, but I had to forgive them for the things that were impacting me in such a negative way. And once I was able to forgive them for that, then all of a sudden this pressure came off my shoulders because I wasn't carrying it any longer. And then what that did is it really opened a cool door for me to start exploring the things that I was passionate about and curious about and heartful about. And then what happens is once you're able to forgive not only others, but forgive yourself. Like I'm a person that can get stuck in this idea of I haven't done enough, or I haven't reached my potential. I can get stuck in that. And then what happens is I just find this process of forgiveness, and I just say to myself, look, did you do more than yesterday? You did do more than yesterday, so take it easy on yourself. I mean, I grew up as a weird side note, but I grew up a gymnast, right? Like a very critical sport, had a Hungarian coach, very, very hard on us, but in a positive way, because it forced that self-reflection to happen all the time. You were always in this process of looking at your performance. But if you're turning it the wrong way, then that can become self-critical, and it can actually be a huge barrier. So forgiveness for me became a really big part of the change and uncertainty process.
Mm. Yeah, I can speak to forgiveness on a little bit of a side note, because it kind of made me think about when you're changing. So when you undertake to change who you are, what you have is the whole rest of the world has already gotten a preconceived notion of who you happen to be, right? And so, Steve, you're absolutely right. And I've had to learn how to do this myself. You have to forgive yourself for what you used to be. But the uncertainty when you move forward into the world is that nobody else knows what you're doing to change, and nobody else knows necessarily who you happen to be now versus their previous notion of you, their preconception of you, or how you carried yourself previously in the world is how everybody happens to know who you are and what you are. So for me, I've had to work on forgiving myself for, and I don't need to use pejorative language, but for doing things that were toxic and unhealthy and caused a lot of personal grief in my life. But nobody else has to forgive me for that. I'm the only one that has to forgive me. And the whole rest of the world still might see Jay as previous Jay. And that's not up to me to change. That's up to people to catch up with where I'm at, and for me to ignore the fact that they still think I'm who I used to be. So I can forgive them for thinking that that's how I was, and I can forgive myself for being that way, but I cannot change the perception of that. So there is an uncertainty moving forward when you change, because people don't recognize me. You know, I'll run into somebody and I'm almost 75 pounds lighter, and they're like, "What the hell, man? You're so skinny. You used to be this big guy." Or, "Well, you don't drink anymore? What's that all about?" You know, and they're kind of shaking their heads at me, or they see the haircut that I have, or the clothes I'm wearing, or the activities that I'm doing, and they see videos of me talking about meditation, and they laugh and mock me. And so the uncertainty of life when you change is that you're going out into the world as a new thing, and you're novel to everyone. So now that change and that uncertainty is going to be part of your external environment as well as what you're feeling inside as you have changed. So you have to forgive people for thinking you're who you used to be, and give them time to see through your actions, not just what you say, but through your actions, that you're this now. And you kind of have to give people a little bit of grace period with you, because they're going to continue thinking you are who you used to be until they see that you've developed into something else. And that's been ever present in my life for the past 2 years, even at home. You know, if you could talk to my wife, she'd say, I'm married to a different guy now. And I mean, fundamentally, I care for her and love her and am who I am. But often the things that I used to do are no longer there. And it's a strange thing, because she's got to see me right from the moment that we started dating to now. And I'm 180 degrees different. You know, I turned my feet exactly the opposite way and started walking a different path. And it shocks my wife now. You know, it's such a strange thing, because there is the core of who I am, and I brush my teeth the same way and dry my body off the same way, but I don't speak the same way. I don't act the same way. I have changed everything in order to walk away and get away from what I used to be. And so my wife's pattern in her mind, my wife's pattern has to change. It's uncertain for her too, because 8 years of me acting a certain way when there was a situation in front of me, now it's different. Now I'm a little more stoic. I'm a little more calm. I don't get enraged and have angry outbursts. I'm not drinking anymore. I'm home more. I'm wanting to be part of the kids' lives more. And it's so that change and uncertainty, while I have it, I create a gravity of change and uncertainty with my external environment that requires a level of forgiveness, Steve. So I really like that you brought that word up, because I think it's also important in this.
Well, I think that if there's one more layer to add to it, I've started using language, like even with my family when things go sideways. I've just, instead of digging my heels in or trying to prove that this change has happened or trying to prove how stuck they are, I've just started saying we can try again tomorrow. And I've literally pushed my chair back from the table numerous times over the years when things are going the direction that I know is going to not be healthy. And I literally will push my chair back from the table and be like, hey, guess what? We get to try again tomorrow. And I remove myself from the situation before we get into old patterns, right? Because that perception is exactly correct. It's and people do need time. Like, and that can be a hard part of this deal, where we're in uncertain times, or you're what. And I think a side note of this too is, I think it's really important to walk alongside people who are in the process of change. Like, I have a friend right now who's recovering from a major injury, and so he's chosen no alcohol, no caffeine, no sugar. He really is in the Get Right program right now to help his injury recover, but it's also helping his spirit recover as well. And I was just with him in Whistler I've been on the road for the last month, and I was in Whistler with him in the biggest party scene that there was, and I could see his discomfort of not having beers with the crew. Right. And so what I did is I just saddled up right next to him. And when anybody came around, offering him a drink, I was just his defense. I just kind of ran as a bit of a buffer for him and said, oh no, he and I are doing non-alcoholics today. Or like, oh, we're having, soda and lime or whatever it is. And I didn't say anything to him about it. But if I'm being honest, I could feel his appreciation that somebody was alongside him, that he wasn't an island unto himself. Right. And when we think about the collective as a whole, anybody who's listening, if you are going through the process of change or you're in uncertain times, let somebody come alongside you. Because as males in particular, I'm going to be stereotypical for a second, I feel like when we're in those zones, we almost have a tendency to push people away, because we might worry about what their perceptions are. But if you're in a process and you can let somebody come alongside you, allow that to happen. Let somebody walk with you on this. Because it does offer, I think, a great deal of comfort if you're struggling.
Sean, you got any thoughts?
I do. So I think that, like you fellas, quite some time ago, I was in maybe the same phase as you guys were. but I'm not anymore. So that's the good news, because there's another phase beyond the phase that you're in right now. And the phase that you're in right now is called caring about what people think, which is what you guys are caring about. Who thinks about you, about whatever? Who cares? Just do you. And the change that you're creating right now, as long as it's good for you and it's good for those around you, the rest is just white noise. It's just details that you don't need to focus on. Now, it's good that you stepped up and sat next to your buddy and, acted as a buffer, Steve, etc. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Just do you. Don't worry about what you did for him or he did for you or the group did for you or you did for the group. Just do you. And that change that you're creating within your life, don't worry about bumping into someone that you saw 10 days ago and now you're 1 pound lighter, or you're 1% clearer, or you're 1% taller, or whatever. Don't sweat that. Who cares? That's their narrative. Don't worry about your past narrative and how to spin that past narrative into their past consideration of you so that that past story synchronizes up in the moment for them in the now. Who cares? I always say this, just put it in the rearview mirror, bro. Put it in the rearview mirror. And now, what does that even mean? When I say that, some people nod their head and think, yeah, check. But they don't go any deeper than that. And what I'm suggesting is the rearview mirror is your car or your truck or whatever you're driving. How often do you check your rearview mirror when you're driving down a straight highway, cruising at the right speed, feeling good about life? You're not like constantly looking in your rearview mirror. You're looking ahead, driving ahead, scanning the road ahead of you. Unless you're a freaky paranoid freak where you're scanning over your shoulder every 2 seconds to see if someone's quote unquote chasing you or hunting you or stalking you or whatever. That is much like life. Just put all of the nonsense in the rearview mirror. You can spend the rest of your life teasing out all of the nonsense details and hyper focusing on, I got to apologize to that guy, and then remember that time I borrowed that hat and I didn't return, I got to apologize to that guy. You can spend the rest of your life living in the past, or you can just throw it in the rearview mirror, not worry about the details, and get on with driving forward. When you bump into someone who says, bro, you've lost 75 pounds. Yeah, I have. How you making out? You are a new person every day, as long as you remember that you're not in the past.
Yeah. You guys got any more thoughts? I got a couple comments here. Any other thoughts on that before I jump into these? Good? Okay. A couple quick ones. Dave, morning, y'all. We got Salty Jinx. That change brings with a personal level of resilience and capability that nothing else can give you, and that is 100% correct. Being able to change builds that resilience. We talked about it yesterday on Fear and Courage, was the fact that your courage is built upon the foundations of you dealing with your fears.
Well, maybe. We can't just simply generalize like, yeah, change does magnificence. Actually, there's change that is negative.
That is a very good point. Yep.
Yeah.
So be aware where you're going, 100%. Salty Jinx says, but we need that challenge that comes with the struggle of change and uncertainty to find our own resilience, which is a great point as well. James Mowat says, a lot of people will fear change because of how it makes them look to others. Once you get over that, you're golden. I think that's what you just said there, Sean. Salty Jinx, kill your clone daily. I really like that a lot. The River Viking, when I started to make change, I noticed that the people I attracted to the old me don't necessarily fit into the new me life. And that's something people struggle with. Change affects everything. Salty Jinx agrees. He says, I've noticed that as well. I've also noticed that it's opened me to the opportunity to include more positive people or driven people into my life, which I think is also true in that there are negative sides to it, but there are also positives. And then I have this question from the River Viking. What was the moment that made you reevaluate your position and recognize that change was needed? Sean, let's put you on first.
The moment was right now, every day, all the time, period.
Okay. Steve, how about yourself?
Um, to narrow it down to one is tough. There was one particular, we had an event in our family dynamic between my brother and my dad that was quite negative, and I was there for that and kind of saw how all that went down. And I remember consciously getting in my truck, driving away, and being like, "That is not how this is gonna. That's not my story. This is not how my story goes." And that one sticks out for me as a big one. I also had a big injury too, where I was in the hospital and laying there, and I was had a chance to think about a lot of things, and that was like the one with my brother and my dad was more of an emotional, like I'm going to get healthy, I'm going to get whole, I'm going to have a mindset of being on the good side as opposed to the dark side. And then the injury one was like, okay, I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to take good care of my body in this recovery. I'm going to get strong and healthy and fit, and I'm going to be able to attack. And those were like two separate ones that definitely forced the change process.
Jason, what do you think? I mean, you kind of
Yeah,
talked about it earlier, but hit it again.
yeah. So I don't need to go into huge detail, but I came to recognize that I was lying to myself every day. And then there was a spotlight shone on this at work as a policeman. I ended up getting in trouble for committing a procedural error and having to admit that openly and then deal with the consequences of that. And at the same time, I was at my worst mentally, and yet I kept telling myself I was okay. I kept saying that I was fine. And so there was this revelation where I knew that I was just lying. I was just living in total dishonesty. And so you guys have heard me talk about truth a lot. And I think truth is directly tied to change, and what Sean said earlier, that everybody needs to change. But in order to change, and for me, this was one of the things that helped to catalyze my forward motion and my progress and my momentum into something better, a better version of me, was I embraced honesty and truth when I looked in my own eyes and when I looked in the mirror and saw the reflection of who I was. And I had to accept that honesty and that truth, because it will reveal the things that you need to change. And if you cannot be honest with yourself, if you can't look in your own eyes and sit in front of a mirror and discuss with your own ego the things that you need to do to change, you never will. You'll create a facade, an egoic falsehood that you're awesome, that you're good where you are. I thought I was really awesome for a long time, but on the outside, I found the woman of my dreams. I had a nice house. I had 3 great kids. I owned a nice vehicle. I had things. I had a prestigious job. I made good money. And to everybody on the outside, maybe, or for most people, that looks like a successful life. But it was in shambles. It was in total shambles internally. And so it was just a facade. It was just a nice paint job. And inside, I was in total ruin. And it wasn't until I was honest with myself that I could actually start changing. Because your ego can make you lie all day, every day, until the day you die. And you'll never change until you get a hold of being honest with yourself. I was 75 pounds overweight, and I did not think I was morbidly obese. And then when I started to lose weight, I realized, oh my God, I was lying to myself this whole time. And it was like every day that I had a few beers. It's just a few beers. I'm not a big drinker. It's just a few beers every day. But it was all lies. And so now I am really dedicated to embracing truth and honesty when I look at myself. And I don't care what everybody else, what their truth is. For me, I have to be honest with me. And if that hurts a person's feelings, if my line in the sand is causing somebody else discomfort, or if what I'm doing to improve me is making people feel uncomfortable around me, well, that's just too bad, because I'm being honest with me. And when Sean first said that earlier about everybody needs to change, yeah, but upstream to that is first everybody needs to be honest with themselves, and that's really, really difficult. So that was for the River Viking. That's what happened, was I finally got right with honesty personally. And I'm not saying it's perfect. I've got a long ways to go all the way to the finish line with being honest with myself, but it is something that's ever present, that is in the forefront of my thought process, and I don't let it go, and I work on honesty every day.
It's a great lesson. Any other thoughts on that?
I think that I really like that idea that Jay just put out there about that line in the sand, right? And then it connects to Sean's earlier idea of just putting it in the rearview mirror. Like there will be anybody who's working on change or anybody who's in uncertainty right now is going to have that moment where they have to draw a line for themselves. They have to say, no, this is where my boundary is, and this is where I'm comfortable being, and this is where I know I need to be to facilitate what I want for myself. And if people don't want to join you in that, then it's okay to let them go. Put them in the rear view, like Sean said, and just keep moving forward. Because what that line does is if you cross it, it's 2 steps back. Now, that doesn't mean you can't take those steps back over that line again. But if you hold the line and just keep moving forward, regardless of who joins you, then you're gonna create the change you want to see.
Yeah. Sean, you got any thoughts on that?
I do. So, one thing that I don't want anyone to step away from this podcast today is without a clear path forward. So we haven't talked too much about uncertainty. We've just been focusing on change to some degree. So it feels to me like it's just being a little overly complicated. And I think there's a much simpler path forward for change. And it's as simple as this. Just do better. Smile more often. If you're scowling all the time, change. All you have to do is start freaking smiling, you nerds. And I mean, once a day, twice a day. Now it's 10 times a day, 100 times a day. Start freaking smiling. I've had virtual conversations with people and look them square in the eye and say, bro, stop being such a jerk. When's the last time you smiled, you loser? When? That's right. Today you smile. And just one smile a day. Then it's 10 days in a row. Then all of a sudden that nerd is smiling on the regular and not even realizing they're smiling now. And I think it's as simple as that. A lot of people overcomplicate change. They scheme and dream and plot and plan and never get across the start line because they're so busy planning the change. Forget about it. Throw all of your nonsense in the rearview mirror and freaking start smiling today. Things will start looking a whole lot better on the change path, that's for sure.
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing up the uncertainty piece. I wanted to take us in that direction as well. I think kind of what you're also getting into is you get to choose your velocity, right? If you want to go from scowling all the time to one smile a day, then okay, that works. But you can also go to smiling all day because that can also work. If you want to see that change and you want to see it right now, you can put that
easy.
effort
Don't
in.
get all crazy. Don't smile all day. That's
Pick up your face, man.
Whoa.
No, but you bring up a great point in the fact that I do this quite regularly is when I actually recognize that I'm just scowling. I'm sitting on the couch by myself and I'm scowling. And I'm like, why? What is this all about? And then I can actually engage the issue and manage it. But the question I wanted to ask you guys is, do you think that uncertainty in and of itself is just living in the future? Like it's a removal of the present, because we have to understand, what is like what's going on right now is happening. And to your point, Jay, that you mentioned being honest with yourself, that is when you take yourself out of the future, or you take yourself out of the past and you put yourself into the present and go, okay, this is happening. And then dealing with those issues. Do you guys think that that's where that uncertainty comes from in terms of living in the future? Or do you think it's
No.
something else? No?
I mean, this moment right now is uncertain. What are you going to say next? What am I going to say next? What's going to happen 5 minutes from now? This is all uncertainty. I don't live in the future and consider that uncertain. What I do consider is what I'm doing right now is uncertain. And I need to be comfortable in that uncertainty, this micro chaos that we're in right now of who's going to speak next, who's going to say what, where are we going to go in 5 minutes. That is all uncertainty to me, but I'm comfortable in it. So I'm not too concerned about the uncertainty of the future because I'm in the uncertainty of the now.
Well, and I think there's a level of development that is required to be comfortable in uncertainty. If you've lived a patterned, comfortable, sedentary life And now at the age of 50, you're going to turn on the change switch and decide to live in chaos, which I believe is uncertainty. You have no resume to back up your ability to do that. So you got to start a little bit smaller than, let's say, a guy like Sean. I'll just use you as an example. It's easy to pick on you because you have this massive resume compared to a lot of other people. It's easy for you to say, I just live in uncertainty, because you're awesome at it. You've got a resume a mile high compared to a lot of other people. So I think there's a scaled accomplishment to this, that for most people, taking part in uncertainty might be one step a day, versus for a guy who has lived in chaos for a long time and developed a real powerful skill set and has all of the evidence to prove that. Chaos just might be where you're comfortable because you know how to operate in that. You've trained yourself for decades living in it and experiencing it and doing things on purpose to bolster your ability to live in uncertainty. Uncertainty for me.
So Jay, it's a fair point. So let me ask you this direct question. Would you prefer to live in the uncertainty of the future or the uncertainty of the now?
Well, to say right now, I would prefer to live right now, because I have developed a mindfulness practice. And I think that mindfulness allows you to be in the uncertainty of life without spiraling out of control and trying to drum up the past and predict the future.
Right. So with that said, and I appreciate that, if you're choosing to live in the uncertainty of the now rather than dwell constantly in the uncertainty of the future, then it really comes down to what you just previously said, as getting better or more comfortable with the idea of more and more uncertainty in the now, engaging in the now more and more, so that at some point in the near future, you're like super comfortable in the now of the uncertainty, rather than having to dwell on, oh, I got to start planning for the next 10 days of that uncertainty. If you can deal with uncertainty now, you can deal with the future uncertainty, as I see it. So is it just a case of execute against the now as long as you can to get better at the now sooner, and then over time, you eventually become comfortable in the now all the time? What do you think?
Well, it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's a bit of a balance there. Like everybody literally lives in uncertainty all day long. And like you to your point, Sean, an atom bomb, a nuke could get dropped while we're on this podcast, and life will change for everybody, and it will be very uncertain. So we all, to a certain degree, live in uncertainty. So I suppose the voluntariness of uncertainty is just how hard you're pushing on that throttle, right? Because you can live in uncertainty at 2,000 RPM, and you can probably live in a level of uncertainty at about 8,000 RPM. So it's just a matter of, I think it's just a matter of time and experience, Sean. Like literally, the more time you spend doing something, the better you get at it. And if all you do is live in patterns, then I think it's going to be difficult for you to just flip a switch of change and just start living in an uncertainty all the time. I do really think it takes a buildup of resume. Like, and when I say resume, I mean literally experiencing uncertainty with a level of pleasure and a level of acceptance that that's kind of how life is, while also voluntarily doing things that are different in your life to create that bit of uncertainty.
Steve, what do you think?
I really like that idea that Jay just brought up. When I'm teaching and working with youth, an expression we use a lot is you have to crawl before you can walk, you have to walk before you can run. And that idea that Jay just brought up of almost learning to like the uncertainty. Like that's a cultivated practice, right? Like if you've had a trauma-based background, or if you just have a poor set of coping skills or skills that are in development, it can feel like drinking from a fire hose just to get out of bed or just to get out the door. And if you can learn to navigate that, like with baby steps first, and then all of a sudden you appreciate getting out the door because you feel the sun hit your face. Now that we've checked that box, now getting out the door, that's going to be a pattern of behavior that has changed. We're walking out into the uncertainty, but we're not feeling the fear at the door now. Now what we're feeling is, man, that sun hits my face. That feels so good. I can take 10 steps into the uncertainty. And then as we build up that pattern or that resume of just, and I think I come at it from maybe a little bit different lens, because I mean, I'm watching kids coming through the door that have, I'm talking like a zero ability to navigate the daily world. It's becoming alarming at points. And so I think a lot of folks are probably starting right from square one in terms of how to facilitate or handle this idea of uncertainty. And you don't have to look very far in the media or the news to hear how much the word anxiety is being used en masse amongst our population. And I'm wondering if that, I mean, well, I don't wonder so much. I feel like I have a fairly confident idea that the anxiety that people are feeling that is now being labeled as like a diagnosable challenge is just people's inability or an unwillingness to engage with uncertainty, because the world has gotten far more complicated than it has been in years gone by. And we could, that's a separate conversation, but I do feel like we're willing to change the language from uncertainty to anxiety, when perhaps we should just take a step back and be like, okay, look, I mean, yeah, there's uncertainty in everything. Like Sean said, he could totally disagree with what I'm saying right now, and that's uncertain. I don't know what the response is going to be. But regardless of his response, I'm okay with what I've just said, because I've got like a foundation that I sit upon. And so I can handle the criticism if it's coming my way. Whereas a chunk of folks, I think, aren't quite ready for that just yet. And so, they do have to crawl before they walk, and then they walk before they run. So, yeah.
So there is a missing piece to this, I think. And so I'm going to use your example, Steve. Some young kid is laying in bed and they're uncertain as to what the weather is outside. So they don't know if it's sunny or not. And they're not going to get out of bed because they're uncertain. And they don't want to touch that door handle and figure out if they have to change by stepping out that door. And so we all get to lay in bed all day long if no one holds us accountable. And so I feel that if you've got some uncertainty in front of you and you're not facing that uncertainty, if you don't know what the weather is outside right now and you're scared to go find out what the weather is right now, someone should be holding you freaking accountable. Like, get out of bed now. Go see if there's any sunshine in the world now. Now, you can say as nicely or as harshly as required, but you got to hold that moment accountable, because if you don't, the individual isn't, because they've been spending the last however many years laying in bed, uncertain.
That's
with
where
no experience. But go ahead,
Yeah.
Steve.
No, I love, and that's where Sean, like earlier, he said, smile, you nerd. Like, that's actually, it's funny you chose that language, because I use that in our house quite a bit with my kids. And it's like, I literally said that to Gus last night. He was being a potato on the couch, and I said, get outside, you nerd. Like, go play with your friends. And it was just, he needed that little bit of a catalyst, just to, like, dad's telling me to get outside. I know dad's going to come outside with me, which I did. I went outside with the kids and got a little game with these gel blaster things and got a little bit of it going. And then once they were off and running, then I can pull myself out of that and they're off and running, right? But it's like, yeah, we use that language quite a bit, because sometimes you do need to kickstart somebody, and just if you do it with a little bit of humor, it goes a long way sometimes.
That's what I said to my boys last night. What's up, nerds? Get off the games. Let's go.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I think in today's day and age is a challenge too, because Sean, when you were a kid, if you wanted to know what the weather was like, you had to go outside, or at least look out a window. Like, you had to physically get up and go look. And today's challenges, I think, is that we don't have to look anymore. We can believe, right? I can look up the weather, no problem. Easy peasy. I don't have to look out the window. But the key thing is, I do have to look out the window. I need the experience of to see whether or not it is light out, right? I could look at my weather app and it would tell me it's sunny and 23 degrees outside. And then I go outside and it's cloudy. Oh no, that increases in uncertainty, because now the thing that you're trusting isn't giving you what's actually happening, et cetera, et cetera. But the experience of going outside every day, all the time, whether it's raining, whether it's snowing, whether it's sunny out, whether it's whatever, gives you the ability to look at something like, oh yeah, the weather says it's sunny out. Well, I better go check anyway, just to be sure, right? Because you can understand that what you're reading is uncertain, or you can understand that the world you're entering into or engaging in is uncertain, and therefore you need to seek the experience to confirm, to make certain or uncertain, if that makes sense. And I think that that's a key proponent in this dealing with uncertainty, is to physically experience it. You got to figure out what it is you're uncertain about, right? I don't know whether or not CrossFit will work for me. Well, I got to go to class to figure that out, right? I don't know whether this conversation is going to be a good one. Well, I have to enter into it in order to find out. I can't just assume based
Yeah.
off of another organization thing.
What you're talking about is a tiny little band-aid moment where, is my phone lying to me? I better go confirm. No, it didn't lie. Okay, good. I'll check it again in a year. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
Or how often do you think your phone's lying to you? Once a month? You check once a month? Or you think CrossFit? I think CrossFit might be good for me. I think I'm going to go sign up for the trial session. Yeah, I think it was good for me. What's next? Consistency is next. The consistency of getting out your door every freaking day. I ride in all the weather, all the days, all the time. I know what the weather's doing because I'm literally riding in it. And that's different for most people. They will look at their phone and think, it's raining today at 2 o'clock. I ain't riding. You ain't in the game. You ain't in the game of life called getting involved in a consistent rainy day, as it were. And so I think that there's, you can approach uncertainty as, wonder if the weather matches my phone, or you can just put your phone down and go stand in the rain and you'll figure it out every day.
I was hoping you would make that point, Sean, because in my mind, when I think of uncertainty, is that the best way to deal with uncertainty is create certainty about certain things, right? You just said it. You don't care what the weather is. I can't say you don't care what the weather is, but you understand that the weather changes and that the weather is uncertain. But the one certain thing in that moment is you're going to ride.
Yeah.
Right. So you're creating a certainty within the uncertainty, which allows you to handle that uncertainty.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. We got a few minutes left here. Any final thoughts? Let's walk down the line here. Steve, final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think we've touched on a lot of things around uncertainty and change, and I think it's like build yourself a process that exists in your life that is certain. Like, have healthy practice, be disciplined, right? I did my first cold plunge this morning. I just got a cold plunge, one of those new Recover kits, and I despise cold water. It's one of my pet peeves in life. And my wife's out there with her cup of coffee. She's like, "Are you actually doing this?" And I'm like, "Well, what kind of man am I if I don't?" And so into the cold plunge I went, and I hated every minute of it, but I'm going to be doing it again tomorrow because I need to build that discipline into my day. And for me, I look forward to those. What used to scare me about those types of things, I now sort of look forward to, and that is overcoming this and creating a healthy pattern for myself. So whatever it is, stick with it, be disciplined, do the things you don't want to do when you don't want to do them. And then you create these things that are certain, and they help you tackle all the rest.
Jay, thoughts? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to comment on your thing about the weather, because it kind of reminds me of how society is set up. I know this is a little philosophical, but that's the way I am. So somebody says to you, "Hey, Chance, it's nice and sunny outside," and you're like, "Okay, cool, but I'm going to go check just to be sure." Well, think about how we talk to each other. How society is set up right now. Everybody's just good the way that they are, right? That's been the tag handle for about 20 years. You know, you run the race and you come in last. It's okay. You got your participation medal. You're good the way you are. You don't need to run faster. You did it. You managed to get across the finish line. And instead of having that, like, okay, well, they're telling me I'm good, but I'm going to check. I'm going to check against myself that I'm actually good at this. So we're set up in a world, at least in Western society anyways, or in Canada and the United States, where everybody's being told they're awesome the way they are. And then you live by that, right? Your ego's like, "Hey, yeah, I'm awesome the way I am. It's okay. I'm living this way." But Chance, what you're saying, I think, is like, no, you got to go and check yourself against that. You know, you've got to go and say, somebody says, "Hey, Chance, you're pretty awesome." Okay, cool. I appreciate that. I'm going to check to make sure I'm awesome. So that's what came to my mind was, my children are dealing with this, and I have to do the opposite. I have to try and tell them and challenge them that they can grow and be better. You know, they come home and they've got their little participation medals and trophies and stuff. And it's like I've got to fight them to allow them to recognize that there's more to give in life than just going to the starting line and trotting across the finish line. That in order to grow and be better, you can't be just happy with I'm good enough as I am. And it's everywhere, wherever we turn, everything we turn on, social media, the news, the education system. It's all about you're good the way you are. And I don't agree with that. I agree with it. Sean said right at the beginning of this, you're not. And so you got to check your Weather Network app to make sure it's not lying to you when it says it's sunny outside. And that was what I thought of, Chance. I really like that because it allowed me to philosophize on, we have to check ourselves at the door. I think we have to check ourselves in the mirror. We have to, if someone's telling us we're pretty rad or we're pretty awesome, approach that with some humility and make sure you're actually really awesome before you go and accept that.
I like it. Sean, final thoughts?
Yeah, and just to build off what Jay said, I think the more insidious, evil aspect of this entire conversation is it's not someone telling you that you're awesome. It's you telling you that you're awesome as you spend the last 10 years laying on your couch watching Netflix, thinking that it's sunny out, it's rainy out, it's whatever out. I don't care. I'm in my basement. Who cares? That's the certainty of a life wasted. And so if you want to go live a full life, you want to enjoy the spark of life that you've got on this transient moment on this planet that, you know, is a blink of an eye for most of us, go do good things for others and be certain about trying to help others. Be certain about trying to create a smile in others. That's the kind of certainty that you should be focusing on, is trying to make those around you better. And in so doing, you'll make yourself better.
Yeah. You know, one of the greatest lessons I learned, took me a while to actually learn it, was that the only constant in life is change. The moment that I learned that, it allowed me to build upon it, and I was able to manage a level of uncertainty. And then as I kept going, I grew into the person I am today, which was shaped and molded by all kinds of different mentors and different uncertain events throughout my life. And this is where I am today. And you can be here with us today, as we are every day here on The Collective. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Chimo.
Cheers.
Chimo.